What's up, guys? It's your boy TGK here on TGK TV, and today is the very first video of one-on-ones with TGK. Today's guest is Rob The Insurer. He has the Rob The Insurer Podcast in Dallas. Very successful, in my opinion. He has over 80 episodes, and he has had very notable people from Dallas to join his podcast, which is pretty amazing when you look at the list of people that has joined his podcast. So we're going to start the video of the one-on-one interview with Rob The Insurer. Hope you enjoy. What's up, guys? Your boy TGK here on TGK TV, here with my friend Rob The Insurer from the Rob The Insurer Podcast.
What's up, everybody?
Today we are launching the first episode of the new series on the actual channel here, and I'm gonna title it One-on-Ones with TGK. So welcome, Rob, to the show, man. I'm glad you were able to make it. Learning about you, I learned that you've done internships for the Cowboys, you've ran the flags for them. You've been at Mavericks parades and watching them win the championships and watching them lose one. Been through a lot of stuff, right? And now you're bringing a lot of those experiences, and not necessarily talking about them all the time, but you bring a bunch of experiences coming into the podcast, and the way you're able to communicate with people, the way you're able to attract people to the podcast. What initially inspired you to do the podcast before we even get to all your guests that you've had?
Thanks for that question, Mario. What inspired me to do the podcast? So when I was a teenager and even like a young kid, I always had something in my head, man, like where I was like, man, I want to change the world for the better. I'm here for something big. Right. And I don't know why I thought that way, you know, and then when I got to college and kind of went through the party phase and Crunk Rob, you know, my girl was mad because she's like, I never met Crunk Rob. And I was like, man, girl, you don't want to meet him. But, I kind of got lost, man. I kind of got lost in the path of life. That motivation to change the world, you know, went away. In a 5 to 7 year period in my early 20s, I probably had like 15 or 20 jobs, you know, no stability. Damn. And then I found out I was gonna be a dad, you know, and that desire, that burn came back to wanna, hey man, you're about to have a kid, man. You better straighten up. You can't be Crunk Rob and be successful in this life. And I have a degree in broadcasting, and I have a passion for talking with people, and kind of coming to an age where I was like, hey, I'm really good at having conversation with people, no matter where they're from, what background. I can relate to anybody. I've talked to people just in life, like in my everyday life, from hood of the hood to the rich of the rich. You know, whether it be my friends that I know or people that are my customers in insurance. So I thought, man, you know, I kind of was motivated by discovering the Joe Rogan podcast, and I felt a lot of similarities between me and him that, you know, wow, like this guy is kind of similar in me. He talks to all kinds of people. Why don't I do a podcast? And it's just kind of, you know, that is a collective reasoning of why I started the podcast.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man.
No, I appreciate that answer. The thing with podcasts, right? Like, I think a lot of people, there's a bunch of people that want to start it, right? And for those that want to start a podcast and knowing where you started and where you're at now, because I would say once you're 80 plus episodes in and the amount of guests that you've had, pretty successful at this, right? And especially coming from Dallas to see Chris Arnold, Emily Jones, and then you have these network specialists, and you also bring on friends. So you're not just looking for top heavy people, you're looking on for people that are actually trying to get to that level, right? So you bring everybody. How did you go about starting it? Like, what did you need to do to start the podcast, and what did you learn from when you started to where you're at now?
To start the podcast, you know, initially, and this was a daunting, just a thought in my head in general for a while, was getting past the thought of, okay, I want to do a podcast. What the hell do I need to do? Like, what's needed now? You know, and I was like, well, what the hell do I do? You know? So it sounds crazy, but it took months just for me to build up the courage to Google, this is what you need for a podcast. And I was like, okay, all right. Okay, you know, it seems like it wouldn't cost as much as I thought. I have a laptop that I already bought in 2012. So that's one step. I Googled and found that I can download a lot of software for free. I figured pretty much that, minus the laptop, which I bought years back for $500-600. Shout out to Elusive. He is part of building an app now, but he's growing it himself. But I had the laptop and I Googled, like I literally tell everybody, Google and YouTube, how to start a podcast. Right. And I pieced all that together and I was like, okay, I downloaded Audacity. It's a free program. I downloaded the Soundbar online, where I could use that as my sound mixer for free.
Right.
Libsyn is the podcasting service I use now. I pay $15 a month. They hold all my podcasts. If my computer crashes, all my podcasts are on Libsyn.
Nice.
With a few clicks of the button, I'm able to, from Libsyn, to upload my podcast into all the different categories. And then, learning that, I talked to you about editing. My first few podcasts sound like crap, and then I got to learn, all right, I got a style, I saved my edits to where now the podcasts sound good. So like in learning, I think you asked what I learned from beginning to now.
Right.
And what I look for in the guests, right?
Yeah.
What I learned back then to now is I learned a lot about I learned so much about so many different types of people. About 70 to 80 different people I've learned about. Some of those people I've met for the very first time. But what I've learned with those people is that it goes back to this poem I wrote back at the Albertson self-checkout when I was a freshman or sophomore at UNT. I wrote a poem, and basically the poem talks about how we're from all these different parts of life. We're from all these different parts of background. We're tall, short, black, brown, Asian, girl, women, whatever. But what keeps us, we're so similar. We wake up and we go to bed.
Right.
We want to have a happy life for the most part. So I've learned that through everybody, that is something that holds true in my experience. And as far as how I look for the guests and all that, to this day, it just comes natural. I mean, initially it was, hey, just people with good vibes, but now it's just kind of whatever feels right.
Right.
With you, I felt like, hey, it's the right time. It's time. Like Mario's kind of touched on it a few times. All right, it's time. TGK time. Boom. And I messaged you, and then we scheduled it.
Right.
And then that's kind of how it happens, man. Sometimes I'll have the guests planned out for weeks. Sometimes it'll be a day before. I'm like, hey, podcast tomorrow, and we'll just do it.
Man, that's awesome, man. and that's the thing, like with kind of like what you asking me about YouTube and me asking you about podcasts. It's same thing. It's content, right? But it's two different realms of how you get the content.
Yeah.
With me, for my content, I base it off of what I see as far as the Cowboys, and your content, you bring people to share their experiences. So now, in a way, what I'm doing is a video version of that in a shorter time, right?
I like that, man.
But with that, like, so for those that are watching, right, and they want to make a podcast and they're like, dang, Rob got his on Spotify. How do you get that on Spotify, right? Like,
yeah.
SoundCloud is one thing.
It's easy, man.
You would think Spotify is like a whole different thing.
And that's what I thought, man. But dude, that website that I use now, Libsyn, Libsyn, that's the website I use. Every time I distribute the podcast, it's all that stuff's like, a lot of that was preset. Like you can I can click, hey, I want to put this on Spotify, and I click a button in my Libsyn settings. And it'll say, okay, every time you hit send on this podcast, it'll distribute to Spotify.
Wow.
It don't cost me extra money. I'm paying $15 a month, and that service is included. And that takes it to iCloud or iTunes, and it sends it to SoundCloud. It sends it to Twitter. It sends it to all these other platforms, but I just market Spotify and iTunes. But that's it, man. It's really easy.
Wow.
It's really easy.
So Libsyn has probably like a license.
And the logo, shout out to Jesse Jam. He created my logo. I just sent him a bunch of ideas, like literally just texted him a bunch of ideas I had in my head.
Yeah.
He sent me a few images, and then bam. we found the image for the podcast. But it's simple, dude. And I tell people this all the time, and they're just in life. Like, Google has the answer to everything. Like, I'm serious, dude. Like,
right.
You can Google how to do anything.
Yeah.
So I Googled, myself to learn how to do a podcast. I didn't learn that shit in college, even though I have a degree in that shit. But in broadcasting, I didn't learn podcasts in college. I just taught myself.
Dang.
Yeah.
And then that's the other thing about when I listen to your podcast, you have like just a natural ability to move the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it is always moving, right? And the fact that there's I imagine there's certain people that you'll talk to that you come across that you don't know about certain things that they speak on.
Right.
But you have this ability to be able to continue that conversation moving forward, even though if you may or may not understand it. Can you speak on how you process that in that short amount of time while you're talking, right? Because you don't have that opportunity to, hey, let's cut right here, right? Let me process what you just said. All right, now I have a follow-up question. It's on the fly. And it's a skill. It's a very hard skill to have. How can you elaborate on that and kind of simplify that for someone out there that's trying to maybe learn that skill that might be a natural thing for you?
I appreciate it, man, and I'll be honest. I appreciate the compliment. I'll be honest. As far as it is a skill, but it's taken a lot of practice. I mean, I've always had a very energetic personality, just as a kid. I remember instance where I was at a bus stop with two of my friends, and they were talking about a specific topic, and I was so all over the place as a kid that I was the kind of kid that I was always change the subject of a conversation. Not trying to change the subject, but I just didn't know how to have a conversation. Right. I had so much energy, but I didn't know how to direct it. So it took, just growing up, and I didn't really start learning how to listen until I got into sales, like in my early 20s. And I was fortunate to work with good companies like AT&T and Mattress Firm, where they had good sales training programs. They really taught you how to listen to somebody. A good salesperson knows how to listen for what somebody's wanting. So I guess now I never thought I'd be 34 years old, but I'm here. I've had all this sales experience.
Right.
Like, that has taught me how to listen to people. And then as the podcast has progressed, I've been fortunate to have honest friends and family to tell me, hey, you interrupt on the podcast, maybe be quiet a little more. Don't try and relate everything to yourself. It's not about you, it's about the guest. Elaborate on them, not you, not your experiences. So just being able to take criticism in step and not be offended by it, that's a key thing as well. But yeah, just learning to, hey, I can always improve. I'm still learning. But that is how I learned how to communicate. And if I can give advice, just, hey, listen to what somebody's saying. Don't think about what you're going to say while they're talking. Listen to what they say and then give your response. You don't have to have a response right away. Give yourself a few seconds to think and respond.
Right.
People try and rush these days, man, but you really got to sit down and just listen to somebody and then give an honest feedback.
Right.
And response. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, because I know I've heard some of the podcasts you had where you had Emily Jones, Chris Arnold, what's the guy's name? Texas Rangers.
Kyle Bird. Radio, Eric Nadell.
Eric Nadell. So aside from your friends, right, and then your friends, associates, or just people in general, when you have bigger names like that, notable names, is it intimidating when you talk to them? Do you have this feeling in your stomach, like nerves, anxiety? Because for me, whenever I'm doing a video like this, obviously for me, I get that vibe, right? Initially, then you warm up to the conversation. Do you come across that? And if you do, how are you dealing with that in the moment?
I have gotten to a point where I'm pretty comfortable with the podcast, but there has been one where I was a little intimidated, and I was like, all right, I really got to focus here. Was when I did the one with Eric Nadell, because I'd never met him in real life, and I remember listening to him as a kid, always on the radio,
right?
and I know he's very famous, like in the sports media world, and people who are in the know. The reason I was intimidated, one, because of that. Number two, because it was in a different setting. I couldn't do it at my normal location, so I had a buddy. Shout out to Nathan Aguero, who let me do it at his office. Shout out to Eric Nadell for coming to that office, which was not the normal place I do the podcast at. And it was hot. It was in the summer, and I was sweating. And I had to go to the elevator, come down the lobby, get him, come back, bring him to the elevator, and man, like I was like, all right, I was nervous. In the first few minutes, I kind of was nervous, but then I got right to it, and I was like, all right, man, just use what got you this far, and that is, of course, listening to him and basing the conversation off of what he's talking about, and kind of interjecting what I think is interesting too. But that was one where I was intimidated, and that was how I overcame that fear of intimidation. Was like, all right, hey man, he's a regular person just like everybody else. You just do the same thing you've always done. So yeah.
And that's awesome. And it kind of goes back to, for anyone watching, it goes back to starting something, right? It's like when you start something, there's a little fear of maybe it might not come out the way you want it to be, right? And it's one of those hurdles you have to get over. And I could, as a YouTuber myself, I go through that, right? So for those that want to create a podcast, like what is the one necessity, right, that you need going into creating that content that you think people out there would need?
So if you're going to start a podcast, that means you already have the motivation to do it. So I wouldn't say motivation. The one thing or way of thinking I would advise people to have is to allow yourself to go into it with an open mind, realizing that, all right, the finished product is not going to be the first few podcasts. I'm in podcast number 80 something now, and I even like, all right, this is not the finished product. I'm always continuously working to improve it. And don't be hard on yourself, man.'re going to have podcasts where the sound doesn't sound good. I have podcasts that are out there now that just sound like crap. But I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I'm going to have those, and I'll own up to those, but for one day I'll have 1,000 podcasts, and you won't even remember like the one that sounded bad, and I still have one more I need to do with somebody else from early, that I want to correct. And in my head, I'm like, all right, we're going to do a good one with that person, So yeah, man, that's what I would say, is just leave yourself open to improve, and just don't be too hard on yourself, man, because just the fun part is the journey. And
sometimes you can be your own worst enemy.
Yeah,
really.
You can. I speak from that from experience. You can be, but you gotta. I mean, for me, what works for me is praying, to the big man upstairs, and going to church, and reading devotionals from the Bible or motivational stories just in general. Just got to keep going, dude. What separates man, that's one of my favorite quotes, man, is what separates man is not lack of knowledge, not lack of strength, but rather a lack of will. I think that's Vince Lombardi that said that. If you got will, man, you can do anything. Tyson Fury just became heavyweight champ of the world, and a few years ago he was ready to commit suicide. So
definitely
anything's possible, man. Humans are very powerful. We just have to realize that.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that, sharing that with us.
For sure.
Yeah. So again, with this series is trying to keep it straight to the point and short, and share some experiences and some tips and advice that you give out. So before we end this episode, man, if you'd like to tell the audience where to find you and how they can contact you.
You guys can find me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok.
Oh, you got a TikTok?
Yeah, I got like 2 or 3 videos, but I know it's time to get on there. Rob the Insurer, at Rob the Insurer. That's it. Facebook, Robert C. Broadner, Rob the Insurer. You'll find me out there, but that's where you can find me. And everybody keep doing your thing, baby. Yeah.
I appreciate it, Robert. I thank you coming on to the show, man. Being
Appreciate
the first guest means a lot. So hopefully everyone out there that watched this, hope you pick something up from Robert. And feel free to reach out to him. You conversate with anybody out there looking for some advice or any tips on podcasts, man. It's been your boy TGK. And until next time, guys, we out.
We out.